Good. So let's start then. I will just make Christian enter. Hi, Christian. How are you?
Hi.
Okay, everything is fine. We hear the sound, so it's good. We see Christian, so which is great. So Christian, thank you for being here, so that we can really help the audience about software development, because it's a topic that is a bit difficult to talk about sometimes, because we had the previous rules of MDD, we have the new rules of MDR. So now we have also new requirements. We have a lot of new SAMD software as medical devices that are developed, and so all this at the same time, which makes it a bit like a big, if I can say, a lot of pressure for some people to say, what should I do? What should we do? What are the best practices to develop a software as a medical device? And I'm sure that with your presentation today, you will help us. We will do the presentation. I think on the presentation you have already a kind of an introduction of the company, of what you are doing. But can you just maybe tell us as an introduction who will be listening to that? Who will be, if I can say, why people should be listening to this presentation, if I can say?
That's a good question, because today it's also a football game. Sweden is up playing. Right. So why are you listening here? You should watch football.
I mean, it's not now, so it's fine. So they still have some time before to watch the match. So
no. I thought when you asked me, Monir, if I could talk to this show, I thought, well, I could talk about standards, I can do the normal stuff. But then I thought, well, I get approached with a lot of different questions when I meet people about how to develop software. It's too complicated. So I thought, well, I will share my practical tips about how to work. And I think both software engineers working with software could use this stuff. And I also think QA/RA could find it useful to understand a little bit about the collaboration between R&D and quality. So it's both legs. I will try to provide some highlights or enlightenments about that.
Yeah, I think it's clear, and it's mainly what is needed, because there is a lot of shadow here, and we have really to put some light and explain to people exactly. I mean, some of the things that we'll maybe say today are just an opinion or just best practice that we think about. It's not like sometimes rules or legislation. So it's just what we think is the best practice to do things for your devices. Okay, so let's start the presentation then. Here it is. So then the stage is yours.
Thank you. And as Monir said, don't be afraid of asking questions in the comment field. I will do my best to answer.
Yeah.
So what is best practice really? And to be honest, I believe that's all about, well, in the eyes of the beholder. So I will share my best practices and try to explain a little bit about how I think and why I think that's best practices. And I hope you will enjoy and learn something about it. So what I often hear, and perhaps you recognize yourself on this, it's so burdensome to release a lot of documentation and paperwork. I also meet a lot of people saying we release 2 times a year. We would like to change that to release a little bit more often. And some people would even be happy if they do it twice as often. And then I also hear people say, we want to do this on a daily basis. Can we do that?
Okay.
I will come back to that one.
Okay.
And a frequent question, do we need to have everything on paper? And you who are listening to this, perhaps you are not having everything on paper. And if you are having everything on paper, I suggest you definitely keep on listening, because I will give you some examples and provide some tips and tricks why you don't need to have everything on paper. So first of all, common pitfalls. I will share this list up front, and we will then discuss it further on in the presentation. So common pitfalls I often see and hear about is including software version numbers in many documents. By doing that, you invalidate a lot of your documents and need to update them every time you release new software. And I also see a lack of trust in tools, which means that many people work manually. And that's, in my opinion, very boring. Too many traditional documents are requested by QA and RA. And here I perhaps already starting to step on someone's toes, because I think sometimes there's a misconception between R&D and quality and regulatory, and that's almost like a built-in tension between the different departments.
Yeah.
So document numbers are changed between releases, and that's also a nightmare, because then you can't have documents you prepared for the previous release, you can't use them again because they now have new document numbers. And last is something I really, really hate. Sorry, I perhaps should be a little bit more politically correct, but insane use of signatures. And that's why I would say that the value of signatures is really falling with a number. So I've seen in many cases that people during a release, for example, of a software, you have like 5, 6, 7 signatures on a release note. You have a lot of, but there's so many signatures. And at the end of the day, I definitely believe at some point it's just waste of time and energy, because after the, let's say, the second, no one reads the document anymore.
Exactly. I mean, this is what I wanted to tell you, Iman. At a certain point, I mean, I had a case where we had 12 signatures on the documents because the VPs and the managers, directors, everybody should sign. And at one point, people said to me, "Oh, I don't need to read that because anyway, the VP will have a comment, the other director will have a comment, etc. So I don't need to read that at all. So I will sign and I will pass it to my director or VP president because he will have anyway a comment. Even if I review it, accept it, everything is fine, they will have again a comment, so they will start back from zero. They will have to make the modification. I will have to read that again. They will have again a comment, etc. So at the end, it's too much.
It's just too much. And perhaps I should feel flattered because I've got the question, have you read the document, Christian? Yes, I have. Do you like it? Yes, I do. Okay, I sign. So just because I said I've read it, okay, all right. So today I would focus on a couple of things I believe are important to understand to get this right. We can discuss about requirements and standard and theory and things like that, but I'll try to focus on what really drives value during software development, or basically any development, but in particular in software development. So I want you to understand the meaning and value of traceability and why you should spend time and really get this right. Identify your information for sources. So where is the valuable information that at some point ends up in documentation or documents? And then decide what document it means to you. Is it really a physical piece of paper with all these signatures, or is it something that can stay close to the source code in a repository? And lastly, understanding the difference between software and design release, because that's two different things. We'll come back to that. But first, who am I? I perhaps should present myself in addition to what Monir said before. My name is Christian Kaestner. I have about 20 plus years experience in the medical device field. Been working as a software developer for plus 15 years. To be honest, today I'm not really a good programmer. I tried to do some Python programming last year, and well, I solved the problem, but it wasn't nice.
So just do you prefer? I mean, you were a software developer, and now you are more, if I can say, in the other side of the field. So
I'm on the dark side.
What? Sorry.
I am on the dark side now.
Okay, great. So I think there is a lot of things that is great in your position. Then, if you were a software developer and now you are working in the other side, like quality, regulatory affairs, etc., it's also good for you to have a view on both sides, if I can say, of the field.
Yes, and the reason why nowadays I work as a trainer, and I also work with auditing stuff and things like that, I worked as a developer for a long time and prepared super nice software, in my opinion. And when I was ready, people started to ask for, where are the documents? We want documents. Honestly, it was so boring, and I didn't understand the need for it. I couldn't understand why. And that's why I started to learn more about standards in general and the medical device regulation at that point in time, trying to understand the rules behind it. And that was quite interesting, and that has influenced my way of thinking when working both from the engineering side and then understanding the quality and regulatory side.
Great. I think great.
And that's why I call myself a little bit of a standard nerd today, because I like to read the standards to understand why I need to comply with them. And as you probably already understand, I'm a hybrid between R&D, QA, and regulatory. So I'm a little bit in all the places. And I'm super lazy. So whatever I can do in an automated way, instead of typing documents, I really spend time on trying to make these as automated as possible and let the tools do the job for me.
Yeah, systems, create systems that are
I prefer to spend 40 hours on automating something or creating a system doing that, and then it takes like 5 minutes for me to create the documentation instead of spending 30-40 hours in creating documentation for each release.
Yeah, agree.
So I like to be lazy. A couple of products I've been working with. I've been working with TENS, that's muscle stimulation for pain relief, so you can relax muscles, pain relief. I've been developing embedded software for these products, a whole range. I've been working with devices used to evaluate lungs before transplantation. So you take a lung from a donor, you place it in this white box, and then you can test the lung if it works. So you can artificially see the lung breathe outside of the human being. It's amazing. I was both project manager for the embedded part and worked with the programming of the bloodstream going through the lung.
Right.
A gray box. It's a steam sterilizer. I worked as a project manager with replacing the control system for a range of steam sterilizers. Just a couple of products I've been working on. As I mentioned in the beginning, I am a standard nerd. I have a couple of pictures from standardization work. And just to mention something, in these groups, some of the groups, as you see the low picture, are really big. And you can imagine the discussion taking place when we're trying to agree on a change of a requirement in a standard. It's super lengthy discussions.
I can imagine,
Yeah, it sounds crazy. And you can just imagine what happens when you have people from US, Australia, and UK starting to discuss the English language.
Okay.
I check out because I'm Swedish. I just listen and learn because apparently English really means different to many people.
Okay.
If you find me on LinkedIn, I now and then share a couple of things. Learnings from real life. I have shared an article about what happened with edition 2, 62304, if you are interested in that. I also share a couple of video clips, and the last one with the shark, I was a little bit upset after notified body audit, but that's for another story.
Okay.
Today, I work together with Medical Device HQ, and we provide trainings within the medical device industry. So whatever training needs you have, design control, risk management, electrical safety, and much more, you can find it here. We also have a YouTube channel. So here today, I think there are about 25 YouTube clips. And it's all about medical devices. So you find design control, risk management, a lot of clips for me about software because I've been lost out on delivering a lot of clips, risk management, so on. So have a look. Today, I will stop a couple of times and see if there are any questions, comments. Monir, feel free to fire away. If there are
we just have more people that were coming. So Mutalib from Malaysia, Jay from the United States, so Camille from France. We have Pawan from India again, Florence from Belgium. So thank you for being here. And as I've said, if you have any question, please place that on the chat, and we will pick it as soon as the moment is coming regarding the questions or the presentation. Okay, so let's go now into the meat of this presentation.
Yes. So the meat of this presentation, I want you to understand more and dig into understanding traceability, because to me that's really key to success. If you remember, I said in the beginning, I'm super lazy, and if you get the traceabilities right, you really can leverage that efficiency. First of all, what is traceability? So in ISO, not in ISO, IEC 6234, there's a definition which says this: the degree to which a relationship can be established between two or more products of a development process. And looking at the software development process, to me, there are three really key essential requirements which relate to traceability. So you have requirement traceability, you have traceability of software hazards, or perhaps I should say causes, and you have traceability of changes. So let's have a look at the requirements of traceability. In the standard IEC 62304, you find this pretty simple requirement. So you have system requirements, software requirements, and you should trace them to a software system test. That's about it. But what I prefer to do is I typically also include risk control measures as an input, or it should be an input, to software requirements. So I consider those two as system requirements and don't differentiate them really much. So when working with these and you put tags and numbers on them, I recommend you to try to use tags and numbering all your requirements. Perhaps to some, this is no rocket science. You do it already. But in many cases, I see people not really getting IDs on risk control measures or putting really good identifier on which can provide traceability to system requirements. They just have a list of text and no ID number on them, tagging them.
Yeah, I think it's helpful when you say, oh, I wanted to talk about this system requirements, so system number, this one or this one. So when you have maybe 2 or 3 elements that are close one to the other, or that are differs from small vocabulary, if I can say, to have really a good understanding of what we are talking about, so that there is no misunderstanding between people there.
Yeah, and it's also super good if you need to reference them in any kind of documentation, if you have a clear identifier. And to some, these might sound obvious, but others perhaps don't use it. And then I really strongly recommend you to try to use good identifiers on the different items. And the feeling you should have is that, assuming you are in an audit, and an auditor asks you, this risk control measure, can you please show me what software system tests are used to check if this risk control measure is working? Then the first impression you should have is that you should start smiling. So I fixed that, and you can easily just show these are the tests. But I often see people starting to sweat and say, well, let us bring up all the documents, all the paper, and I start looking in binders and trying to find which connects to what. And this is where tools can become handy. And I will come back to talk about tools all and all over again in this presentation, because tools will support you. And by single click in a proper configured tool will help you. So you can click on the risk control measure and it will show you the requirements and associated software system tests. If you want to be really good at requirement traceability, I think you should expand it beyond what you see in 62304 and really have the full chain. So you have requirements moving into software item, you have unit tests associated and software integration tests before you then finally hit the software system test. Because if you have this established, when you later work with changes and maintenance, if you would like to change the requirement, you can easily see where in the software, where in the source code is this solved? Where do you implement this requirement? And again, it's super valuable to have this well established and not just in different documents. You have to start reading and looking and finding and searching. So really consider again to think about what tools could be used for this. And we will come back more to this. What often happens here is that instead of having a structured way to managing your traceability, all this information ends up in different documents, kind of sometimes also even disconnected from each other. So you have to take one document and then you have to read through another one. And somewhere, let's say about software requirements down to the pink or purple colored boxes here, you start having trouble to follow the traceability. So watch out when you create a lot of documents. Make sure they're tied together. So how can you do this? How can this be achieved? So my recommendation is really to leverage on your ticket system, because ticket systems can be used for traceability purpose. So if you have, let's say, you have listed all your requirements as ticket in your system, then you can use that ticket and follow the history of where it's implemented, who did it, and you can follow a trace in that ticket system. You can also use requirement management or PLM tools.
So just for ticket system, just before, we talked about Jira and Bugzilla. So what are those things?
Sorry.
What are those things? So just maybe because I'm not a software developer. So
yeah, sorry, good question. So there are different ticket systems. So ticket system in general is a way, if you have a bug, you record it as in a database, and that's typically called a ticket system. And Jira is one provider or a system provided by a company called Atlassian. They provide this as a whole pre-configured database setting to manage, say, any work task, or you could say it's kind of to-do list intended for software developers. And Bugzilla is a similar thing. It's a freeware, open source. You can download it to use it in your company if you would like to. But you could say any ticket system is like a to-do list. So it could be work tasks, it could be bugs you need to fix, anything like that.
Okay, so is it something that I mean, people have to be trained, if I can say, to use that also, like to know when to use that, how to use that, etc., etc. So it's a system that you can integrate inside your development plan, if I can say, to make it easier than to collect all the information, to act on it, and to track how you have done that, who has done that, and each version, etc. So yeah, okay.
Yeah. And the next one then is use requirement management tools. As I said, I'm a lazy guy. If I can invest some time in setting up and configuring a tool helping me in managing all these traces, I prefer to do that and trying to maintain a manual prepared documentation. And here are a couple of tools from different vendors. Aligned Elements, that's actually a Swiss company. They have a quite nice setup where you can work with requirement management, and they also integrate a good way of exporting this information to real Word documents. So they have had a pretty nice solution for that. JAMA is also a web-based tool, which is used for requirement management, test management. Also capable, definitely. Ratchet Doors is one of the, I would say, it's almost from a Stone Age. I would say so. It's been around for many years. Originally intended as a pure requirement management tool. It's pretty capable. You need to do some setup. Now, much more tools. And here, what you need to do if you would like to take my advice to use tools, try to figure out what's your need, what your needs are in your organization, and just compare a couple of tools.
Okay, so we have just maybe for that we have this question from Michelle, which says, would you manage system requirements and software requirements in Jira?
Or should I say to that? It depends. I would say yes, that happens. I've done that.
You have the right vocabulary for quality and regulatory affairs. It depends.
Yeah, it comes with age. This unfortunate, it depends. Well, I would say yes. I've worked with configurations where we use Jira and Confluence in combination. So that the Confluence is like an advanced wiki, also from Atlassian, that company. So I've managed system requirements and software requirements, risks, all of those in Jira. And what I then do is I assign different types. So you can have different to-do lists, so different ticket types. So one type of system requirement, one type of software requirement, one type for risk control measures, as an example. So I think that was I would say, short version, yes. I can see that's possible. Yes.
Okay, good. Maybe another one. I don't know if it's appropriate for this time, but in Agile methodology, could we say that user stories are the requirements of my software?
May I say it depends again?
Yes.
Well, yes, I think I would say the tricky thing is then it needs to be verifiable. So it needs to be testable. So if you have a requirement, if you look at what should a requirement be, it should be easy to understand, it should be testable, it should be unambiguous, so you can understand it. So if you define an appropriate number of tests to it, I would say it would probably fly as a requirement.
Okay, good. Okay, so we'll keep some other question for later.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move.
Let's see where we are. The third bullet, you've probably read it already. Plan to avoid manual steps. And whenever you feel that you're copy-pasting between documents, or you feel that you have redundant information in many documents, then you should definitely consider if you're doing the right thing. Because I've been working in some projects where I was told to, you have a requirement specification, and then you have a test specification, a validation specification, and in all these documents, I had to copy in the requirements in every single document. So whenever I changed a requirement, I have to repeat all the text, open up all the documents, and copy all text in again. And that just took time.
Yeah.
And like me, I was a consultant then, so I could just charge more, but it was really a waste of time. So
we have the same issue, for example, when we are talking about the product description plus the intended purpose, then the population, we have to put that on the technical file, on the clinical evaluation report, on the risk management, on a lot of documents at the same time. So yeah, as soon as you change one thing, you have to change it to the others also.
Yes.
So it's a bit redundant.
And in many cases, you really don't. It's there probably for traceability purpose, but then you could consider, as I suggest down in the corner, you could consider to just use the ID, as I said before, sys dash a number instead of the full text. Then you still have the traceability and linkage between them.
Yeah, correct.
So time is flying. I probably need to speed up a little bit.
Okay.
We were talking about the 1 hour.
Yeah.
So in the normative text of IEC 62304, you have a requirement saying you shall, from your hazardous situations, you should trace what software item can contribute to a hazardous situation and what software causes are applicable, and then define appropriate risk control measures, verify and document evidence. I used to just swap the order because this makes more sense from a sequence of event perspective. And this is, to me, one of the bigger challenges in 62304 because it's quite a challenging requirement. So how can software items, through a course, contribute to a hazard situation? And what risk control measures can you do? And if it's a little bit bigger software, you will probably find yourself having quite many items. There could be many software courses, and this could be a lengthy risk analysis. And here again, try to see how you can stay away from having this perhaps only an Excel document, because it will take time to work with it. Let me give you an example. Assume you want to change a risk control measure. To do that, you first need to review if one or several hazard situations could be related or linked to that risk control measure. So there's a relationship between those two. And then you need to see if you change a risk control measure, is the changes you have in mind, is that appropriated and applicable to all the software courses you had? And then here you see there's even more arrows. So what happens now is that you have to see if that single risk control measure could be implemented differently in different software items. So you need to keep track of where is this risk control measure implemented in the software, and could it potentially also mean that you need to work on a lot of different verification? So it's a little bit like you're cooking pasta. You want to test if it's ready to serve on the table. You try to pick up one straw. Sometimes you get one straw, and sometimes you get, well, everything. So it's like a sticky effect on it. And this is really where it becomes handy again to think in terms of tools and trying to have a database think about it. And the database thinking is, if you look at this, you see you have a lot of source files. You have a lot of courses. So there could be several courses involved. And you have a lot of risk control measures. So all what you see here is really different items. And you could think of this as different types of database or tables in a big database, if you know about databases. And here, a good thing with having tools to support you is that tools force you to have a similar language all the time. Perhaps you have seen in your risk management work that things are phrased slightly different, but the intention is that it should be the same. And then when you review it, you still get a little bit questioned about, is it the same or is it not the same? but the intention was it should be the same. I don't know, Monir, have you seen that before, that you have different texts in your risk analysis, but at a closer look, it's the same?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. We are using different vocabularies like contamination, infection,
yeah,
or bioburden, exposure to microbe things or bacteria.
Yeah,
it's the same. We are talking about contamination
on
from anything. So it's something that can be considered as the same. But yeah, sometimes at the end, sometimes we give that the same rate. We can get the same, if I can say, risk level, if I can say. So at the end, it's used. We are using also the same risk control measure. So at the end, yeah, it's nearly, you can merge that in one thing.
And this is also strength. If I manage to convince you to try to take some tools to support you in this work, because by using tools, you perhaps you have 10 different courses, and then you define those courses, and you can pick from those courses and put into your risk analysis work. Then the text will be the same every time. And if you feel there's a need to have a new text, well, in this case, with a course example, then it's perhaps a new course. It's not accidentally ending up in a slightly different text. So from a trace perspective, personally, I don't differentiate between risk and requirement. I consider that as any other requirement or element in the traces I'm working with. I just give them typically a different naming and different tag. And I already mentioned, think about traceability as a database thinking. And if you are from QA and you find this a little bit challenging to understand, I really recommend you and encourage you to have a discussion with the programmers or the developers, because they know this language. So if you go to the development department as a QA person and ask, hey, I need this information, and by the way, every time you release a new software, I want this updated. I'm pretty sure they will help you, because they don't want to sit and write papers. So if you explain the needs and that you need to have it updated for every single release, I'm pretty sure I will come up with some clever solutions for you to make this as quick and efficient as possible. And with that said, I think focus on how the trace can support you in your daily work. And please try to stay away from starting with how many documents or what documents you should create. And both bullet 2 and 3 here is really, I would say, I encourage you to have a discussion between R&D and QA about this, because the amount of documentation that needs to be prepared usually by the developers. And if they are just half as lazy as I am, they don't like it. But if they understand why they're doing it and they are invited to the table and discuss how it could be achieved, I think it would be really, really fruitful discussions, and you would see that you are lean in your way of working.
Yeah, I have many examples where we had worked with this kind of, not on software, but on product development. And we played this game of not telling them you have to feel that, but to tell them we need that. And sometimes people come to us and say, oh, I have this, and I'm doing that update each time, etc. Is it sufficient? And when we look, say, yeah, it's exactly that. No need to create anything new. You have it and you use it already, so no need to add a new layer of documents that they have to create when it's just a copy paste of what they already have. So I think it's a good strategy to just discuss and say, we need this kind of information. There is no specific format. Do you have something that is close maybe to that? And then maybe the answer will be yes.
And if there's something missing, it's probably a piece of cake to fix that.
Yeah, exactly.
And just add a little bit more, a little piece of information more to that equation. So
completely agree.
And lastly, there's traceability of change, which I think is really important when working with software. And so changes can be anything, like a customer wants to change the user interface, it could be bugs. So whenever you change something, you need to capture that in a relevant problem report. This is terminology, by the way, from 62304, and that ends up in a change request and approval of change requests. And here I really want to make this in red almost. When you find bugs, usually don't use kappa as your go-to method. I've seen that before. I've seen it. Luckily, it's some time ago, but it happens. And kappa is really a full-fledged kappa system is just simply too big and not needed to manage software bugs. With a little bit of, well, perhaps a side comment, if you've killed someone due to software failure, then perhaps a kappa would be appropriate. But usually it's just small stuff. So I think it's not your go-to method, right? And perhaps it's not even your standard procedure for control of design and development changes. It could be something a little bit more, let's say, slim for your needs. And what I suggest and what I prefer to figure out here, it's different for each organization, of course, but I try to identify a flexible change control process. So something needs to be changed, and working with software, unfortunately, it happens quite often that something needs to be changed. So is it only correction? Yes. Fine, let's use a small process. Changes to requirement? Well, no. So perhaps you can do some medium process, still not a kappa, still not a full-fledged design and development change control process. Or is it the last one? Is it changes to system level? If it changes to system level, then it makes sense to involve a little bit more people in it. And the last one, that is perhaps where you find your control of design and development changes, which is required by 13485, the regular quality management system standard.
And just maybe to come back on this one. So just to make a parallel with the MDR, remember we are actually in a transition period between so the 26th of May 2021 until the 26th of May 2024. It means that during this transition period, if you are following the MDD, which is Medical Device Directive, and you are a Class 1 device, Class 1 software, if you are making a significant change, then you will have to follow normally the MDR. This is mainly the requirements here. So this system, as presented by Christian, should also integrate this kind of thing to say, oh, is this change considered as significant? Maybe then we can make it as a large process change or whatever. But you have also to have that inside your system to say, okay, we are making this change. Let's put it inside the filter of significant change per EU MDR. If yes, this is, then be careful, because then you can be following the MDR when you should not, maybe.
Yeah. And I think it's a very important point, because some are luckily staying with MDD for a few years more.
Exactly, until 2024. So yeah, they still have the chance to stay with that. So use this chance.
But be careful with the bigger changes. Yeah. Especially if you're a Class 1 device, because if you make a bigger change and you have a software-only device, it's a big risk that you will end up in Class 2.
Exactly. Exactly. So notified body, then update of technical file, update of everything. So yeah, it can be a nightmare for you. So
personally, I think it's very unfortunate that more or less all software now ends up in Class 2, but that's a different story.
Yeah, different story, exactly.
Yeah, that's a different story. So how is this achieved then, the small and medium larger process? So let's look at an example for the small process, change process. You have a relevant problem. So you could describe a problem in a ticket system, as I mentioned before, and give name to Jira and Bugzilla, those to-do systems. And you just register it, you document perhaps an impact. There was a misspelling somewhere in the text. And then you have a pending, let's say, change report, change request in your system. And when you schedule it, if you're working in Agile, for example, and you have let's say if you have a sprint and you schedule this to be fixed in the upcoming sprint, then I would consider that as approved, because you schedule it, say, yes, we will do this, and then you do it. So that could be a very easy way to integrate smaller changes. You just do it instead of having a bigger change control process associated with it. Should we see, are there any other questions popping up now?
No, but let's take this one, because I don't know if maybe this is so Benoit asked, how do you answer to the software publishers which tell you how can we manage all this documentation when we release one version every 2 weeks?
Software publisher, I'm not sure.
maybe when we are having a like maybe App Store or whatever that is publishing, if I can say the software, if you are releasing an update each time, so I suppose there will be a lot of documentation, or I don't know.
Yeah. I think I will come back to this question. If I may put that on, may I put that on?
I'll put that on side and then we can come back to it. No problem.
Yeah.
No problem. So we can move forward then.
Yeah. Let me see. Yeah. So I've already mentioned this, and I will just want to re-emphasize it. Think in terms of information, not documents. So because information can always be extracted, exported, and gathered, and then form a document. So I think the discussion, as I suggested before, discuss between QA and development team what you need, and that's the piece of information, and then you can bundle this into documents. Where is your information? It can be placed in the matrix, which is the left side, at least on my screen. It could be in source code repositories. It could be ticket systems. It could be in a wiki. Wikis are used frequently to document software documentation, and I think that's perfectly fine if you do the right proper setups. You can have a lot of information in change control system or PLM software. All these are in the digital domain, and they can be. You can extract the information, export the information, package them into documents if you need to. So where is your information then to answer these requirement traceabilities I suggested before? They could be more or less anywhere in what I suggested in the previous slide. Then you need to determine, do you need it on paper or do you want to have it on paper? So that's a question for you to decide. And let me give you an example. Let's say you're working with unit testing. Some prefer or some suggest that should be different documents. So you have document 1, that's the unit test specification. You have document 2, that's the unit test protocol. And then you have, well, how many test records there now might be. This is one way, which then is document-based. But what you could do instead, you just save the unit tests in the repository close to the source code. This is a typical example. We have a software product which is divided into units. In this case, could say item as well. You have source code, and close to it, the unit test is already located. I'm pretty sure. And you have unit test results. All this information is there, so you could just leave it there. It's still documented because it's there. And then you could decide what proper formatting you need. If you get asked to print it, you could format it and make it a PDF document. And while you're at it, you could also discuss with yourself and your team, what about detailed design? That could also be placed close to the source code in the repository. There's no need to have this in a document. So you could save this also in the digital domain. If you want to see more things about this, you can simply and easily Google unit testing in different places. There are a lot of different frameworks, and some of those frameworks are pretty nicely prepared to also being printed in some kind of text file format or PDF to show, for example, during an audit. So what is then the meaning of documented? And perhaps you ask yourself now, since I just suggested you don't need to make a document out of it. So let's see. My view on documentation is that we have documents in what I call the paper world, which are the traditional things like hazard trace matrix, you have a software development plan architecture, and so on. And then we have the digital repository world, which includes the source code, compiler settings, all that stuff, which you basically need to have when you program. Together, this all is your medical device product. So there's no product without documentation, and there's no product without the software. But the funny thing here is that there's very often a big trust in the papers, and people attribute the documents a very, very big value, and perhaps also even a huge value if you look at the number of signatures you can find on some documents. But what we really trust is the output from the digital repository world. Because when I press compile, that ends up in a binary, and that goes out. And there's no signature on this. There's no one in traditional meaning reviewing it, unless you print all your source code and sign the papers. But I doubt you do that, right? So whatever you do in the digital, when working with software, whatever you do in the digital repository world, that's the actual output that you will face the patient with. That has nothing to do with the amount of signatures and document numbers and things. So there's a huge trust in what's happening in the digital world. Typically, the traditional way of thinking is that the paper world is under governance of ISO 13485, we have document control and things like that. But in this world, there is no document control in that traditional way. Still, it is what goes out, and it's the actual product. And there's no way you can verify it with a caliper as you can do in a mechanical thing and compare with a drawing. What goes out is a binary, and there's no way to really measure it. And this is where software validation comes into place, where you need to validate the system you trust. And if you have that validation in place, why shouldn't you trust it for, as I suggested, unit testing, data design, a lot of different other information you can store close to the source code in the repository world? So, Monir, does this make sense, or am I just confusing you on a very big and high level?
No, it's completely fine. Here we talk about ISO 13485 and QSR. On the digital repository world, is this also something that is linked to the IEC 62304, for example?
Well, it says IEC 62304 talks about configuration management. And also this is where you have your configuration management, where the ways you control and manage your source code. Oh, excuse me. So that's where you look at configuration items. What do you need to put under control?
But it doesn't describe this kind of how you store those kind of things, if I can say.
No, it doesn't describe. It's up to each manufacturer to define how you want to store it. If you would like to store your source code on a USB stick and each release ends up in a new USB stick, that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't recommend it. It's just a lot of time. Otherwise, you have repositories like Subversion, you have GitHub. That's different names of repositories you typically use when we're working with software development.
Okay, I have another question from Elkin, which says, what kind of repositories can gather all this information in one place?
As I mentioned, Subversion and Git, they can definitely gather data design, and they can gather whole, because it could be stated as text files, unit test and test results as well. Because when you run, for example, if you run a software release, you run all your unit tests. At the end of the day, you put a label or some kind of, let's say, revision marker on it. Then the unit tests and the test results will be included in that release. And then you know that that test result is connected to the release software. Okay. So, and to take it even further, I've used Subversion to store all types of documents, including Word and Excel files.
Okay.
I hope that answered your question.
I hope. We'll see if Elkin has another comment. Okay, so we are good then. Okay, we can move.
Yeah, I will rush forward. So just a final thing about this, where you store things. Please remember that you need to be prepared. Even if you choose to store it in the digital domain or in the repository world, there might be situations where you want to extract the information. For example, in a 510K submission. So in this 510K submission, you might be asked, what are your data design? Then it should be presentable in some way. But I don't see that there are any problems with having them stored and kept and maintained in the repositories.
Okay, good.
So the decisions for you to make, what can you keep and stay and have in the digital domain? Because I believe it's much easier to maintain. Software developers are more likely to keep the software and the surroundings updated compared to go outside the development domain and update the Word document. And then what tools do you want to trust and validate? And when do you need physical documents? I think we can skip that one because that was
there was just a question maybe here. So Ume, we ask how to ensure traceability in the digital repository world, what you talked about before, I think.
Yep. I would then, in the digital world, what I call the digital repository world, I would include like the ticket systems as well. And
so there each time there is a change, then we know that it's version 1.0001, 1.0002, etc. So each time we are making a change, this will be managed by this kind of system.
Often it's a combination of systems. So you set up a combination of systems which together provides you this traceability.
And you have then the system of archival. The previous version is archived and the new version is coming, and you have then the history of why there was this change, what was changed, who changed, and approval for those changes, etc., etc. So
a common way to do this in the repository world, for example, if you have a change or you work on a requirement. So what's called, in the repository world, perhaps again too technical, very often you have what you call a main. And when you develop software, you do a branch, and from that branch you work. And when you're ready with it, you merge it back to the main again. And when you do this, you have the possibility to set a name on the branch. So here you can then put working on, or let's say, requirement number 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you can see that these changes are related to that requirement. So that's a way to see when this requirement was implemented.
Okay.
And when you close the ticket you have with that requirement, you can also get for free, more or less, in many ticket system, what files were changed, which then are perhaps your software items.
Yeah,
it's getting technical here. I don't know if I'm getting too deep in the.
I think we have people that are trying to find some solutions here with some of the aspects, which is good. So thank you for that.
I'm happy to come back if there's some sticky points here, sticky questions.
Yeah, let's see if people are asking maybe. Yeah, let's see if people are asking for a more targeted topic, if I can say, where we can.
Yeah, then we can prepare some slides for that.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay.
Let's have a discussion about software and design release, because I think that's really, really essential to understand the difference. I've stolen this picture, and I need to just give some credit to Synopsys. I Googled, and I found this picture is good enough. It's good. So it shows the 3 different things which are often discussed. And what I think when it comes to DevOps, I'm really cutting things short here now and making a long story short. I think focuses on culture. I think that's important and a big highlight. And as mentioned already before, try to collaborate over the borders. So try to collaborate. QA, R&D, work together and solve this. There's no point in trying to have as I call it, watch out for organizational firewalls. I've too often seen that we have R&D department and they prepare everything, and then I throw the deliverable over the fence, and
the hot potato.
It's like the hot potato, it just moves on. And I think that's to me that's when our organizational firewalls try to really tear them down, work together, and that's a good thing in a culture, and understand each other's roles and needs. Because as I mentioned before, in the beginning, I'm a software developer myself from the beginning, and I couldn't understand QA and RA people. They were to me like Darth Vader coming from the dark side. So try to understand each other's needs and respectfully try to help each other.
Yeah, I agree.
And when it comes to continuous integration and continuous deployment, I think continuous integration adds value to software development. I think it's super valuable, because if you take it step by step and integrate back, you see that it works. You don't get too big surprises. Another way of working could be that you have a team working and they work on their own paths or the branches, and then after a week or 2, they regroup again and try to get everything together, and that typically don't work. It's a nightmare. So continuous integration is really something I encourage, but be careful with continuous deployment. And I will shortly tell you why I think that you should have keep a close eye on continuous deployment. Release defined according to 62304 is a particular version of configuration item that's made available for specific purpose. And in the context of 62304, software is a component. So if you look at what's stated in 62304, it's release for utilization at system level, which means it's intended, so the software development process 62304 delivers a piece of software, nothing more. And this piece of software, which I consider as a component, is supposed to be integrated into a larger system. And this larger system then, when integrated, is a design release. So usually you have software release that goes into the system, and then you release the design. Okay, so SAMP release, so if you have a software as medical device, is that different? Well, kind of not, because of course you don't have mechanics and electronics, that's pretty obvious, but the software system is still delivered into system integration in terms of there will be technical documentation, there will be instruction for use, there might be design validation. So the software as such needs to be accompanied with additional information to become a design release. And this makes continuous deployment perhaps a little bit of a challenge, because you as a legal manufacturer need to have the big picture, and that's not only the software, it needs to fit together with the other pieces. And I want to highlight also, you have design transfer. If you look at ISO 13485, there's a design transfer. You have a design, and then you transfer it to production. And some might say production is when you deploy it to a production server, or you push it up to a web server or something, when it's taken into production.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, yeah, here on the physical products, we are transferring that to a plant where they have to put it on a machine, they have to use that, they have to create a physical product. But here, normally, when we finalize the development, the product is here, it's already done, if I can say, it's available, and it can be placed on the market.
But still, if you verify your software, how do you know it works exactly the same as you then does in your production environment or your deployment server? It's still, there's still a requirement you at least need to consider.
Now. Yeah, true.
And for your information, then the blue parts or this component thing, that's covered by 62304. The other parts, that's the software or standalone software standard for health software 82304-1. So that's really, they really focus on two different things.
Okay.
Time's flying. Sorry.
No
I was
problem.
soon try to wrap up a little bit.
No problem.
And what I want really to have you to understand is that you don't release software as I call a side dish. My mouse cursor. Because if you do that, you have a challenge, because you don't look at the system level. You don't, if you just continuously deploy new software updates out there without considering if the technical documentation is still valid, is the usability valid, is the design validation as such, are we delivering the right product? You need to take those things into account when you want to deliver your software.
Okay.
So try to keep in mind software release and design release, it's kind of two different things.
Yeah.
So that's why I emphasized, be careful with continuous deployment. Let's see, Monir. I think I had some more slides, but perhaps I should try to wrap up, because we're getting
it's fine.
full hour.
If it's just for five more minutes, so let's continue. No problem for me.
Okay. Then I will take the next section as well.
Yeah.
I encourage good configuration management to support your release work. And configuration management could be done in different ways, but the mindset you should have when doing this is that you have different types of configuration items. That could be documents, it could be source code, build environment, different things you need to build your software. When you release, it's a snapshot of versions of these configuration items. So it could look like this. So for release 1, we have certain revision numbers. Release 2, you have other revision numbers. And the configuration matrix is very helpful to determine what has changed. So it can give you a kind of, let's say, impact assessment of the changes you've made. In 62304, you are requested to have system configurations. So what is the system configuration required to build your software of a particular release? So I think there were some questions before about what documents are needed or how do you need to document them. Let's see. I don't see the question now.
This one, Medna?
Yeah, I think that's related to that one. So speaking of documents, how can that be done? I think if you have this configuration matrix in mind, so you have the list of documents, you don't need to update all documents. By no means, absolutely not. What you need to do is to keep track of the version numbers. And if existing revision is valid, you just keep that revision number. There's no change. And by taking this approach, you can reuse a lot of existing documentation, just update what is really, really necessary. And this is what you then take over and write perhaps in your design release note or something like that. So how to establish a configuration matrix? Here I cut a little bit short in saying you can do that in the repository, because it's a mix of the actual physical documents, it's a mix of perhaps a compiler, it's a mix of different type of items. So Excel is good to structure rows and columns. It's pretty easy to make this as a simple template to get have a structure of what you have and what you rely on.
Yeah.
You perhaps have available tools which might surprise you, that could help you. So I'm just about to wrap up then, and then we can have some more questions at the end if you would like to. Oh,
there was just one question,
yeah.
Sorry, Elkin, so who asked again, how can be integrated the documents of electronics, mechanical, and software components in terms of medical device development as a whole? I think you presented those 3 elements there. So how those documents can be integrated?
How they can be integrated? Let's see. So we refer to, oops, no, not this slide. I didn't like that
before
one,
I think
we shouldn't have side-ish.
Yeah.
So here we have those 2. How they, let's see again.
How can be integrated the documents of electronics, mechanical, and software components in terms of medical device development as a whole?
What I would do, if I'm to decide, I would think in these terms. And I would perhaps make a configuration matrix for each of those domains, or I would have a combined configuration matrix, including mechanics and electronics as well, in the long list.
Okay.
So bundle them all, because in many cases, if you're working in embedded software, you have a heavy dependency to the hardware you're running on. So they really come together, and that's why I think they deserve to be in the same context. So I would just keep on listing the items.
Okay, good.
I hope I answered you, Elkin. Otherwise, fire away and ask more questions.
No problem. You said thanks, so it's good.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good. Okay, let's wrap up then.
Yeah. So when considering daily releases, be aware you release a design, not only software, and that's why I'm raising a little bit of a warning flag. You can do daily releases, but you need to figure out a way to manage why you don't invalidate perhaps usability, validation, and things like that. What you could try to explore is to use, let's say, major, minor patch release numbers. You have different numbers, and say if you do patch releases, that's always a green card. You don't need to consider anything else. When you step up one more in the version number, you need to do a little bit more, and when you change the upper number, you need to do everything.
Yeah.
How good is your change management? Regression testing is key. So if you have any plans at all, and also when talking about MDR, if you have any plans to release a design and you haven't tested everything, you better come up with a very good explanation why regression testing is solid and good enough.
Yeah.
And here I always recommend people to always include risk control measures, because you can argue about a lot of things, but trying to start arguing why risk control measures are still valid, personally, I prefer just run the test again. It's easier to writing a rationale for that. And another stumble stone when it comes to considering daily releases is assessment of remaining anomalies. You need to, when you change software and there are remaining anomalies, you need to justify why it's okay to release the software with known bugs. Okay. And not only that, also why are they not why don't they have a safety impact? And of course, do you have configuration matrix? That's it. My best practices when working with software, my go-to place, I store as much as I can close to the source code. I try to stay away from exporting things to documents just because someone is asking for it, because I don't think it's needed. It's still documented. I do establish a configuration matrix for both software and the complete design, and that ties back again to Elkin's questions before, I guess. I definitely use tool to manage traceability change and create document with export function when needed. I'm, again, super lazy. I spend time in setting up the system and trying to let the system work for me. Make sure developers only change the response to approved tickets. I haven't talked about that, but I never, if I work as a project manager, I never allow people to change anything in the source code unless there's a valid ticket, approved ticket to do that. Because otherwise the shit hits the fan. Sorry for being brutal.
I understand.
Integrate verification activities in workflows, for example, peer reviews. That's perfectly fine to do when you commit code back and forth. You can have peer reviews as part of that workflow. So that's pretty much me.
Right.
I'm on LinkedIn. Don't forget the YouTube profile if you would like to. And if you would attend my next classroom session where we discuss in detail, it's already late in September. There might be some earlier.
Great. So really thank you, Christian, for that. Just maybe in the audience, if there is some additional question, please don't hesitate to place that here. So Christian, in terms of the activities that you are doing, so mainly you can help, if I can say, also people in case they have a project, and are you open to, if I can say, support some companies related to projects?
I'm open to it. Perhaps no bigger, larger commitment, but I'm happy to take consultation and discuss what ways forward and come up with suggestions. Definitely, yes.
Yeah, good. So because I'm sure there will be some need of maybe clarification for some projects, and better maybe for the people in the audience, if you have some doubts on something, so better to maybe have 1, 2, 3, or 4 hours of consultancy just to review everything before that you release, and maybe have to change everything at the end. So so good for that. Okay, so I see no more questions. So thank you for everybody that was on the call. Let me check something. It's maybe something from Elkin again. Let's see the last question from Elkin. So in my company, I belong to a design and development department parallel to the development department. To what extent in my department is necessary to develop a standard such as IEC 62304?
Let's see, design development. That's a good question. I'm not really sure I get the full context here.
But mainly for IEC 62304, as soon as you are developing a software, for life cycle of a software, this is mainly the thing that you have to integrate to your quality management system. So it's not something that is, if you are not using software at all, so you don't need that. But if you are developing some software, any department, department quality or regulatory affairs or R&D or whatever, you have to have that anyway. So I suppose this is not something that is a question related to a specific department or this and that. But everybody should be trained to be able to use this kind of system.
And Yeah, and if you're working with medical device software, you definitely need to understand 62304. And I think as a developer, I recommend it's not funny to read. It's pretty boring, but I think it's good. And for that, check out the YouTube channel, because we released like March last year. No, I think it was March last year. There's an introductory course to 62304. It's like 20 minutes. So if you can stand it, give it a try.
No problem. And then, if you have more questions, you can maybe just connect with Christian on LinkedIn, or have here his contact detail if you have more questions for support.
Yeah.
Okay. So Christian, thank you again for your participation to this session. For everybody, this will be also on a replay on the YouTube channel, and I will also put the presentation. So I have the presentation in a PDF format, so I will put that also on the YouTube channel on the replay. So don't hesitate to go there next week. Or to subscribe to the YouTube channel, so that you can get also directly the notification when a new video will be released. So thank you everyone for being here, and talk to you in another session. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.